Jacqueline Bridgeforth Williams. I am the founder of the Village Initiative, a local nonprofit whose center focus is social justice and education equity in WJCC schools. And we are thrilled and thanking Crystal and Mr. Lassiter for sharing his special day with us. And today we're going to talk to you all, the class of 1965. And we want to talk to you because we are doing a local African American histories project. And that project encompasses creating an African American history of local history through a partnership with the local schools and the College of William and Mary. And it will be taught in WJCC schools. We have created an advisory board of African Americans who will oversee the project, local African Americans, and we want our stories to be told. And today, this is a part of centering the focus of integration, your experiences in the WJCC school system. And we just thank you again for allowing us to take this time with you. We also have a website. The website will be up and you'll be able to go there and see the exhibits and probably some of this information this afternoon and your photographs. And again, we're so grateful. The children, the schools, and everyone of this community, we are very thankful to you all to do this for us today. And we honor you and we promise you to continue to do the work of educational equity and to give the voice of African Americans in this community, have our voices heard. Thank you so much.
Okay, so if we could just start first by just sharing, if you all could share your name and where you are from. So I know some people say Grove, some people say East Williamsburg, some people claim Centerville. So if we could just start with Dr. Lewis first, and if we could go around, you can just state your name and where you are from within Williamsburg.
My name is Elwood Lewis, and I'm from Ironbound Road. And so we didn't have a particular community as such that we were known as, but I think most people just realized Ironbound Road was a thoroughfare.
My name is Thomasine Lewis now. It was Thomasine Lee back in those days. And I'm from the community of Grove.
Well, my name is Freddie Epps Jackson, and I'm from Williamsburg, South Boundary Street, Williamsburg, Virginia.
My name is Kay Pierce Molay, and I'm from Grove.
My name is Curtis Lassiter, and I'm from East Williamsburg. They don't refer to us East Williamsburg anymore. The people here just call themselves Williamsburg. But it's been East Williamsburg as long as I can ever remember.
My name is Vern Hall Parker, and I grew up on Ironbound Road. And my name is Mabel Butler Wynn, and I was Toanna, Virginia. Everybody know where Toanna, Virginia. They called it Twana years ago, but it's really Toanna, Virginia.
My name is Tony Conyers. I actually lived in the historic area of Nicholson Street until I was about 9 or 10 years old. And then my parents and my family moved to Life, downtown Life.
Downtown. Anthony and I were neighbors. It was Junior then. Because I lived also off Nixon Street, Williamsburg proper. But then my family moved to Covent Gardens.
East Williamsburg.
Okay. What's your name? What's your name? I'm Yvonne Tab Austin.
My name is Sandra Braxton Trower, and I'm a little up down from Mabel. I'm from Tooka, Virginia.
Downtown Toanna.
Toanna's the biggest area we have now.
Okay, so now we're going to just norm ourselves a little bit as we I will use the microphone to ask a question, and we're going to ask at this point that you use the microphone to respond, okay? So whoever has the microphone has the power, okay? So can you start, whoever wants to chime in first, and you can just show by just lifting your finger. What was it like growing up in Williamsburg? So if you can concentrate and focus on before you graduated from Bruton Heights, what was it like growing up in Williamsburg?
Well, I start.
Good.
I got one on my belt. Well, I'm Curtis Lassiter, and growing up in Williamsburg, as I can remember from a young age, we were in a segregated area in school, and we went to segregated schools, and I can just remember the difference between the two groups, the white and the black, and I think I felt comfortable in who we were, because I didn't know the other half of Williamsburg. I just knew who we were. We knew we were segregated people. We knew that we didn't have the same privileges as anyone else in Williamsburg, and we went to segregated schools, and I thought we had the same things as I was in my early age in school, but I realized that school was totally different from what we had in what our neighboring school, James Blair. And I can recall that when I went to high school, I could tell everybody that was at James Blair who was in love with who, because we got their old buses and had everybody who loved each other written in the buses. And I was privileged to play football at Bruton Heights, and I can remember Coach Blair going over to James Blair and getting, and also the College of William and Mary, and getting their old football spikes, old shoulder pads, and they would bring them to Bruton Heights, load them up, and pile them up in the gym floor, and we had to go there and get shoes, not necessarily fitting us, because I was about 7.5 or 8 when I was in high school, and I think I was wearing maybe 11 or 12 shoes to play football in. So I really didn't expect it. We also had the used helmet, because we had to get them and paint them gold or maroon, whichever one. We had home dress and away dress. So that's just one thing, and I'm gonna give someone else the time to share what they thought. But that's one of the things that I always remember here in Williamsburg.
That sparks some memories for me. My community was, of course, segregated, and some of my earliest memories are really from the church. Okay, because I remember the church on Nassau Street, the original First Baptist. I remember when they laid the cornerstone at the new First Baptist. And unfortunately, I still remember the stains of the segregation. I can remember the door on the Greyhound bus station that said colored. And I also remember that I guess I was fortunate enough to be a bus driver when I was in high school. Would you believe it? I know you will believe it. There were college students, this is all males of course, women couldn't drive, I'm sure. There were college students, it was widely known they paid them more than they paid the students. I mean, in your face kind of thing, doing the same thing. And in this day and time, I'm going to stretch this a little bit, I still feel the sting of that, and I never was in an integrated classroom until after I graduated from Hampton and started my graduate work at Catholic University. And that was my first encounter with integration in education. So, a lot of memories there.
I know y'all was waiting for me, but Elwood just brought some memories back to me. I was raised in Toanna by my grandmother, and we was poor, and my mother and father separated, and this is why I was raised by my grandmother. So my sister and I, we had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. because my father was in D.C. And I can remember the Greyhound bus that my sister and I had to let the white get on the bus first. And we stood up from Toanna to Richmond, Virginia. And the same thing happened when we got to Richmond. They got on the bus first, and lucky they had about 2 or 3 buses going to DC, and we was able to get on the bus. And my second experience is even on the train. The same thing happened on the train. We had to stand up, and we found the maid, but at the time, we didn't quite understand. And even going into Williamsburg was like going to, I guess, Washington, D.C., going to Colonia, Williamsburg, where that you couldn't use the bathroom, white and colored. And I can remember we didn't have much, but we was able to shop at Williamsburg Shop, and they had a little basement, and only the colored could go to shop at the basement. So it was a blessing when Martin Luther King, and I was there in D.C. when he did his speech. Although I was 14, my father wouldn't allow us for so many people. And after that was a blessing because we could see a change. So I have had some bad experience, but goodness to the Lord, we got through. Go ahead.
Tony Conn. I share the memories that everybody had. I tell folks I had one meal and one night in a hotel in my life before I left Williamsburg. I'm saying one meal in a real, quote unquote, legitimate, non-club, restaurant. And obviously that's because of segregation. Before we were going to go downtown to sit down and have something to eat in a place that your parents were going to approve of. It didn't exist. So I understand that. And that's that part of the piece. In 1964, both James Blair and Bruton Heights, if you, I guess you would call it double A now, but James Blair was probably in the top 5 of one of the top 5 double A basketball teams in Virginia. Bruton Heights was one of the top 5 double A basketball teams, black basketball teams in Virginia. But this is Williamsburg, so who got the press? Who got the accolades? What was the town most excited about? It was obviously James Blair. Black community went crazy about us. People still remind me of that. But that knowledge that the greater community was all excited about Danny and Dick Walker and those guys at James Blair. But I got to tell you, I enjoyed living in Williamsburg. I enjoyed growing up in Williamsburg. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't spent some of the best days of my life with the people around this table. It's a blessing. It was a blessing then, and it's a blessing to this day. I have so many friends across this country who can't tell you where their high school classmates are, where their old friends. I can tell you where mine are, and that is a real blessing. Before I get off the soapbox, I want to be clear. What you see around this table is a tribute, first of all, to good parenting, because I know your parents. Okay, what you see around this table is a good parents, tribute to good parents. and is a testament to trusting and loving God, who, as the old saying goes, the moral arc of the universe swings slowly, but it swings toward justice. And he was not going to allow it to go on forever what we had to do and endure in the 50s and the 60s.
Amen.
We knew that we were being discriminated against. The thing was that we had loving teachers. Being a former educator, I have to give them credit because we had the used books, we had the books where pages were torn out of, things were written in books. We didn't, right, thank you, who loved who. But we had teachers who supplemented what we didn't have in writing. And I have to give them credit. And just like Anthony said, I loved growing up in Williamsburg because when we were at Bruton Heights, we knew that we were with family. And we didn't have to worry about anything. Now, what happened outside of the school went on, and yes, we endured it. But we endured it, just like he said, with good parents and good teachers, the love of God, the faith and hope. And that's what brought us through. That's exactly what brought us through.
Vern Hall Parker. In first grade, I did attend Bruton Heights because that was the only African American school. And I remember, I was in the teacher's name, Miss White, and there was the room in between, and Miss Harris was on the other side. So I don't remember any of you all. I was 6 years old. And starting with second grade, I went to what is now Griffin Yates. It was Frederick Douglass. And I attended there from second grade until I finished seventh grade, which is how I got to know Yvonne and a few others from Carver's Garden and places like that. And I say all that to simply say, what was going on obviously was, it didn't register with me. One of the things I think about is how much I enjoy reading and going to the library. And growing up, I mean, the idea of a public library, I mean, it just wasn't there. You got your books from the library at school, and that was the library. So you didn't think about that they probably wouldn't let you come in because you weren't aware that it was even, in existence. Well, I didn't play sports, obviously. So what I've heard about the used equipment has come from my husband. All of you know Floyd Tinker, big-time football player in Parker with arthritis now. but anyway, I didn't realize, it makes sense, but I didn't really realize that was what, really was going on. So, I don't say it as such a prideful thing. I just think maybe my parents, if they discuss things, because I remember, all of you remember the Stockade. My dad used to work there part-time collecting tickets. Well, it just never dawned on me, and maybe it didn't, I didn't think, the snack stand, we went on one side to purchase our stuff, and they were on the other side, and of course the bathrooms were. But I think it was like, that's the way it was. So you just didn't, you just didn't make a big issue. And like Tony said, well, first of all, even if they let us come to a restaurant, my parents probably couldn't afford to carry 4 children plus themselves to dinner. So my dad worked at King's Arms as a part-time job, but it just never occurred to you that you were going there, for a meal. So I guess it wasn't. I think the one thing I remember my dad saying one time, talking about, and I think this has been since we were grown, about having to pay poll tax. And I remember him talking about that, in order to vote. But I say all that to simply say, maybe you could say I had what you call an idyllic childhood because I didn't really realize all that was going on. I mean, I realized I went to a segregated school, and when I taught, I used to tell my kids that, and they thought that was you went to school with just, they didn't say it, but you could see it on their face. And I've told my own sons, and I'm glad. I enjoyed it. I think we got a good education, and you were in a setting where you felt comfortable, you felt wanted, you felt the community, as opposed to, what I think a lot of children have experienced, as far as integration. So that's what I experienced.
We had to work and raise money
to get the lights out on the football field. And it took us years before we could get enough money to have those lights put on the football field. And then I go back to our band. We wanted to get band uniforms because we had those maroon and gold, probably 30 years old or more. And we wanted to get something else. So what we had to do, we wanted to do something for our homecoming because we used to march down Gloucester Street. And we had to raise money ourselves to get those sweaters, black and gold sweaters. And what kind of hat was it?
A tam.
A tam on your head. So we had to get those. And then we wanted a real band uniforms. And we tried to get those uniforms. So it took us, I don't know how many years before we could raise money to get the band uniforms. And we finally got those band uniforms, I think my senior year in high school. And we were so proud. We were proud people anyhow. And then later on, when integration came in, we started we had to raise money, and it took money from Colonial Williamsburg, took money from the parents who worked for Colonial Williamsburg to pay for the quarter path pool. And that was our pool. And then when integration came through, they fixed it up, and then from there, they eventually took the lights that we had paid for at Bruton Heights, and they brought them over to the first field right next to Quarter Path. The same lights that we paid for at Quarter Path. And I guess I can go to a little bit further. When we had Bruton Heights, we went to Berkeley School was formed, and then during integration, after Berkeley became a middle school, one thing they took from Bruton Heights, and that was that little maroon and gold flag that's on the canopy. And they took our name, Inspires. So that's what James Blair has now. By the way, my daughter, she's a principal of the James Blair. And that's one thing that we carry on. So Bruton Heights name, the Golden Spiders, will always be there. But be thankful for that. Freddie?
My name is Freddie Epps Jackson. I just want to say that as far as going to Bruton Heights, it was really wonderful because I knew people who were 10 years ahead of me and maybe 5 or 10 years below me, and I knew their names, because I had cousins older and then sisters and cousins younger. But one thing that I do remember is our books. And when we opened our books, which we thought were our new books, or because they weren't that worn, they had all these names in them of people that we never knew. I'm wondering, who are all these people, And we used to have, I didn't realize until after graduating that our books came from another school, I guess James Blair. And so it was like, you had to go and you had to put little covers on your book for the ones that were worn and everything. And I do remember that because, I was pretty big on knowing people's names. So, and growing up in Williamsburg, living like 2 blocks from the college corner, we had to walk to school. So my sisters and I, we walked to school. We walked to school and from school. The only time we didn't walk is if it was raining or snowing. Then one of our parents would take us. But I would walk to Bruton Heights School. I would walk to Braxton Court. I would walk down to Franklin Street where my grandmother lived, and had a grandmother that lived in Braxton Court. And coming up in Williamsburg, my grandmother that lived in Braxton Court, Mattie Braxton, she always told us that when we're walking, never to look a white person in the face. Do not look in their eyes. And I said, I'm not walking down the street and not looking in somebody's face. I said, if I want to look at him, she said, you don't look at him. And I said, okay, but I always looked at him. But I didn't let her know that I looked at him. And one really big thing that was really wonderful to me, because I'm a movie lover. I love old movies. I just love movies in the 40s and 30s. When we got a chance where they opened up the Williamsburg Theater, in the beginning they roped us off in the back when we could go in and watch a movie. So then after I think it was Reverend Collins of First Baptist Church. We went through, helping with the integration and everything. And then it opened up and we could go and sit anywhere. And I would always go and sit on the front seat because I wanted to watch the big screen. So, I had very fond memories of growing up in Williamsburg. And, we knew that we couldn't do certain things. And I might say where we lived on Boundary Street, but what they had to separate us was a ditch. So you couldn't drive to my house. You had to go all the way around and go to a place called Crump's Lane in order to get to our house. They wouldn't let cars go. It was the white neighborhood and this big ditch separated us, but that's all gone now. But those are my memories.
When Colin's going to ask a question, but when you get the microphone or if you have your lapel and you're going to talk, make sure you say your name first. So that's how they can decipher the script.
Again, I'm the son of Curtis and Cynthia Lassiter. My name is Carlin Lassiter. As I'm listening to you, I'm starting to see a reoccurring theme of how good your teachers were at, your schools. Bruton Heights and Frederick Douglass, but I know that everyone here represents a certain area, a community in Williamsburg, and I know that the tradition and culture of Williamsburg is that each locality or community also has a church that represents it to some degree. But since we're talking about Bruton Heights and we're talking about, it seems like an equity issue that was going on between especially after integration. But if you can just talk about the intersectionality of the school teacher and the church and how it related or affected your education.
In Kay Pierce, my life, in talking about the church and the school and how closely related they were like family. If we did something at school, it got home before we did. I think that may have been, and I think that had a lot to do with discipline then as opposed to now. The teachers that taught us went to our churches, and so we saw them all the time. They didn't live 20 miles outside of the school district. They lived in the neighborhood, and so they were really a part of the family. That's why I said we were like one big family. Growing up in Grove, my father was a waiter. My mother cleaned houses, white people's houses. And so the clothes that we had, I was one of three. I had older cousins and sister, and so we had a lot of hand-me-downs. The only thing that we didn't get new most of the time was shoes. Okay, we got new shoes, but most of the clothes that we got were hand-me-downs. We had plenty to eat, but our fathers had gardens. And what one father didn't grow, somebody else in the neighborhood did. And so it was like a community garden. So if you didn't have it, I've got it, you've got it also. And that's the way we were raised. And that's how we were raised. Even with the teachers, we were raised that way. There was not a gap between the common folk and the ones who were educating us. We were all the same. And I think that's what helped us feel as comfortable as we did with not having what we should have had.
We had Thomason Lewis. We had one secretary at our school, which I didn't like her, but I understood her. If you did something at school, your mother knew it, your father, everybody in the church, sister so-and-so, digging so-and-so, everybody, and you got licks from everybody. So that's why I felt like I didn't like her, but she told it, and you got your blessings from everybody. And that was, to me, that made it a big whole family affair. So, and like Kay said, we didn't have a lot, but we had hand-me-downs, and if anybody remembers B&L store. We went shopping there all the time, and you best believe something was passed down in that store that you could wear if you couldn't, somebody else could wear, and everybody looked out for each person's child. So it was nobody that was, if your child didn't have it, okay, I'll call cousin Christine, maybe she got something that Kate could use, or Kate had something that Yvonne could use, something like that, but it was always a family thing, and the teachers was right in with it. They didn't neglect the children either.
Our parents really sheltered us. That's what we're able to say, that we had a wonderful childhood in spite of the segregation. Yeah, Tony and I lived right on Nicholson Street, which is one block off of the main street, Duke of Gloucester. And my mother did hair in the basement of where we lived. But the house that we lived in was a historic, some type of house, because on it said Redwood Ordinary 1776. It was down from the jail. So tourists would come walking down the street, and they would come up and they would walk right in my house. And I would go, Mama, those white people in here again. But it was because my house was like a hub. And because at that time, we didn't have a Franklin house. So the men and women who came to work in Williamsburg really had nowhere to live. And I'm sure most of the people here probably had a room in their house. Most people lived with more than one family. And my parents actually rented out 2 rooms to couples, because there was no place for couples. And when they built the Franklin house, it was for men only. So because my house was a hub, we knew what was going on all the time. But in the community, now sitting here with Kay and Freddie, our mothers were in same club and organizations. They had organizations that supported the church, organizations that supported the school, whatever. So the grapevine was always working and always supporting anything or anybody that needed help.
Can you give some examples of those clubs and organizations?
Okay, the Justice Club, the Philodendron Club, Bonton Club, yeah. Those organizations, and of course our fathers had clubs also, organizations. So as a result, because of now the labor they had for Colonial Williamsburg, men were able to work not a 9-to-5 job, because most of the time it was 6 in the morning, they had to go to do breakfast. Then they would have lunch, and then they would have a break in between dinner. So they had nowhere to go, so most of them came to our house. Because we lived on Nicholson Street, which was very close to the Inn, the Lodge, and the other restaurants in town. So my parents opened up their house for that, so people would have places to go during the break time. So, and of course, being a beauty parlor, most of these parents, mothers, my mother fixed their hair, so I knew all the children. They would come with their mother, so we would play. So we had, like I said, a childhood that they protected us from all of the segregation. And because our parents worked hard, but they provided, we had food and we had clothes. It wasn't extravagant, but everything they had to work for. But because of that, we were able to just basically have a really good childhood and just not have to worry about where we're going to sleep, where we're going to eat. Just ride our bicycles there all day, right? Or go down and play on the haystack down there at the Nicholson Street by the old jail. But then our teachers, many of them had not only BS degrees, they had master's degrees. So we had an excellent education from my teachers. And they lived in the neighborhood. And and everybody stressed the education. That was always taught to us at an early age, get your education. And if you said you could read, you were excited about it. So it was a very good childhood growing up in Williamsburg. But even though we had whites with the tourists all the time, I think it worked for us in the sense that they didn't want anything really to happen in Williamsburg because they had the tourists. So everybody was courteous to us. I really didn't have anything that I could say where, I had to deal with some of the things that my friends told me when I went to college. They did, further south. We didn't really have that. But that was also a part of working together because it was a tourist town.
Go ahead, Sandra. Sandra Braxton Trower. I guess most of the ones sitting here that I went to school with, it was a whole different family, my group. I came from Croker. So, we didn't see your mother or so, and we were poor. But, I was grown, I think, when I realized we were poor because we did eat. Your mom and dad always made sure you ate and tried the best they could to put clothing on you. Just like I didn't know I was poor, I didn't realize either that we was in the segregation mode because we were in Croker. It was just the whole area, that whole section was blacks. But I do remember in I think it was the 4th grade, I used to always had toothache. My jaw used to swell so big, but you didn't stay at home. You went to school anyway. They put that, I don't know what they put in your mouth to make you drunk, I think. But they did, and I used to go to school like every other week with my jaw swell. And Miss Fox, she was in 3rd or 4th grade. Third, okay. She took me home with her one evening. She said, "I'm just gonna call your parents." I don't even think we had a phone. I don't know how she got it. But I was glad to go with her. But anyway, she called, she got in touch with somebody and she took me home with her. And she took me to a dentist. It was in Hampton. And she took me to a dentist and they fixed that tooth and fixed it up. And she sat down and talked with me for 2 days about education because I had no interest in school. I came because I was made to go. But that was one of the teachers. I mean, there were several others after I, got involved and everything. There were several others that encouraged me to do what you have to do. It's not about, sometimes it's not about you. You have to think about when your children grow up and what's going to be there. So, like I say, a lot of stuff we didn't know anything too much about the integration, the segregation part of it. Until they changed the school over, until 1964, 65, when the the Civil Rights Act came about. Then you start thinking. Then you could almost see everything, because then you start seeing stuff, but it wasn't told to you first, so you didn't see it until after the fact. But I just thank God, because we didn't have much, but we did have God on our side, because that's one thing that our parents taught us.
Can I say something? Go ahead, Fred.
As far as the church, because you were interested in that, and I grew up in First Baptist Church. First went to First Baptist on Nassau Street, and then we moved to Scotland Street. And when we moved to Scotland Street, we had an entertainment room, which they now call the Fellowship Hall. But we had game tables, and on the other side of the room we used to watch movies there too. And we had upstairs where we had Bible studies where we were taught more than just the Bible. So our church taught us a lot, and we had a good time at our church because we couldn't go to other places to have all these different activities, but we had these activities. It was either with something like a dance or something at Bruton Heights, but we even did a little bit of dancing at the church downstairs in the recreation room, as they called it. So it was like, it was all combined, and it was like to, I don't know, it was pretty a very good experience, because a lot of churches don't have that now because they don't need it, you know, because people can do so many different things. But you know, our pastor, they would talk about integration, segregation. You know, they taught us about life as well as about the Bible. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
I'd just like to say that.
I might not say my name.
I think someone mentioned about we lived in the same community. And as you see this community, this is one of the older communities, probably one of the poor communities. But 4 or 5 houses up the street was our biology teachers, T.A. Fowler, our 7th grade teachers, a couple doors down from him, Irene Martin, and our principal, D.J. Montague. You may have heard of the D.J. Montague School. All of those are right here in this community. So we all lived in the same community. Oh yeah, and who's that? Dr. Pegler.
Talbot.
Oh, Talbot, yeah. Yeah, A.K. Talbot.
And A.K. Talbot.
4 or 5 houses down from here.
And our principal stayed
Yeah, I
in
said, and
Carpenter
D.J.
Gardens.
Montague was in Carpenter's Garden.
Yes.
And
Dr. Blayton lived in
Oh,
yeah.
did he?
And community Groves Community Center. And we at St. John Baptist Church right down on Penniman Road. That church we have always, and we still do today, we consider that church the hub of the community. Anything that goes on, we can go to St. John. And but you know, we had a wonderful life because we didn't know any difference. And I can share this with just getting off the topic. I remember I would be at the A&P, and which is up on the corner of Lafayette Street and what is it, South End Street? North End Street, A&P. North End Street. Right on Lafayette, the first light when you get up to in town. Where the post office is now.
Right on the corner, right by the railroad.
Yeah, A&P is on the corner. That was a grocery store. And I can recall looking over at James Blair, right on that corner where James Blair is. They still have the softball. Matthew Wheeler. I'm sorry, I said James Blair, but Matthew Wheeler. They used to play softball at night, and they had lights out on the field. And I would sit in the car while Mom and them were in the A&P, and I would see these kids out playing softball. But you know, it was never a part of our life. I never thought that I would be able to, and I admired them, you know, and I just thought that was for them, not for us, because we never had anything. And we were talking earlier, and I remember we used to go to the courthouse, and you all probably remember Miss Fitzsimmons. And she was the one that gave the nurse that gave us the sugar and gave us polio shots. Yeah, but we had a certain area of the courthouse. The blacks had to go down one end of the courthouse, and the whites went up the other end, and they got their shots. Yeah, polio. Huh? They came to the school too, but it may be for those who had that possibly had polio. That's where we had to go. And like this community that I live in today, it was poor. And half of us didn't have bathrooms in the house, which I didn't have, and they didn't have running water in the house. I remember until I got to college, I would call home and ask my mom, "You got the water in the house yet?" Wow. and so, you know, that's the type of life that we live. But like I say, we were happy, and we didn't know any other life. We would go across over here on Route 60 to the store, and I got to know George Thompson, whose daddy used to run the store. And those were, you know, to me, it was almost like an honor to meet a white kid at my age, because I never met anybody else. And because we were never put together. And we used to go out and play marbles together. So, you know.
How old were you then?
Oh, I was probably around 12, something like that, when we went out. We used to go to the store.
Was that the first little white boy you met?
Yeah.
Really? Are you serious?
Yeah, that was the first one I met.
But Curtis, you know, we had our own softball and baseball teams, you know, so that was part of the community that everybody supported.
Get the mic.
Say your name. That was another thing that kept the community together also, because we had softball games, baseball games, and of course when the Spiders played, everybody was there for that. So that also kept the community together.
Oh yeah, let me say just quick. We had on our football nights, that, you know, the whole community turned out to football, and they would walk across the field, and they would have mink coats on. I'm not joking you. They would have mink coats on if they had them, and they would come to the football game dressed up, and they had to walk in that mud, and they had to walk across the baseball field, and their heels would go down, and that stuff, and they filled that little stand up because that was the only thing in town for black people, and we enjoyed it, and I just enjoyed seeing the people coming out there. I mean, it was a thrill and an honor for me just to be a part of that. So, I didn't work. And another thing, we were, I guess, indoctrinated not to think about integration. And I can remember when they were talking about going up to the drugstore for a sit-in. And our principal, DJ Montague, came on the PA system, and he said that any of you go up to that thing, consider yourself not a member of Bruton Heights School. And I think that instruction came down from Bird. Roy Bird, yeah. So he could not. Our principal couldn't even allow us to make a choice. I mean, we were told we wouldn't be a part of the school if we did anything for the sit-in at that time.
Tony, I'd like to make a couple of points. First, I want to sort of associate with Mabel and Sandra. Because I sort of had a unique experience, and that is that I lived in downtown, in the historic area for 9-10 years. Went to First Baptist, so I had that experience. Moved to Lightfoot, continued to go and belong to First Baptist, but I went to Zion and Lightfoot a lot, and continued to go to Zion after I left. After I finished high school, whenever I came home, I intended to go to Zion more so than go back to First Baptist. So I can tell you that the experience in Williamsburg, i.e., quote unquote, downtown, the First Baptist experience is not like the Chickahominy experience or the Lightfoot experience or the Crowfoot experience, and to some degree the Grove experience. It's just not the same. I had and I would call it a disadvantage anyway. Whether I looked that way or not, I felt like, and my family felt like, until I was really pretty much in high school, somewhat of outsiders.
Amen.
Because this is Williamsburg, and if you haven't been in Williamsburg 150 years,
Amen.
you're nothing. And my parents came in 1942, okay, from South Carolina. So those South Carolina roots, I wasn't sheltered. Although I was born here, I wasn't sheltered. I knew what was going on down there. I traveled down there two, three times a year, and a natural interest. Actually, my mother had a real interest in civics and politics and government, and instilled that in me. God bless her soul. I made a halfway decent living and stuff. But the experience was different. Buck was talking about, Curtis was talking about the spiders thing, and some of you heard me say, I visited Rue Blair about 6 months before he passed away. I sit in his living room and watch him cry, telling me how he had to go in the dumpster at the school and take out trophies and awards and things that we had, our blood, sweat, and tears in the gym and on the football field, on the baseball field had earned. They just threw them away. So yes, this is a political statement, this is a point of view. That's on purpose. Okay. This is dangerous stuff we're doing. We're not supposed to remember our history. Okay. We're supposed to remember that as the way it was supposed to be. And what we're saying, it won't not necessarily that way for us, and it wasn't. And if you want to know why, and I got the mic, you know, that's why Bruton Heights not school today. Because how is James Blair going to compete with Bruton Heights if the playing field was anywhere near level? Well, the answer to that question is wasn't. You know, so let's shut this thing down, and let's shut down the memory, and y'all just won't shut up. You just keep talking about it. You know, thanks be to God. The whole idea of history of this country is how do we segregate a people and then somehow teach them to be comfortable with it, to be satisfied with it. In the words of what's her name, Tiffany Cross, you know, I'm tired of people spitting in my face and trying to make me think it's raining.
Just one more thing. I was just remembering when Anthony was talking that when we were in school, you know, growing up, I never remember having any black history until maybe the 10th grade.
Oh, I remember.
When Fred Shadding came.
Yeah.
And he was from North Carolina, and he taught us black history. He would tell us, close the history books, because there was nothing in our history books about black people. And he would tell us all about black history, things that we just never had any teacher to ever tell us. I don't know if anyone else remember that, but
you all mentioned how James Blair had the notoriety with the football team and were in the newspaper. So how was word spread in the black community? Was there a black publication? Was there a how did news get around? How were things when it was time for celebration? How did you know it was time to celebrate?
Word of mouth. K Pierce, my life. It was word of mouth. It was just like how our parents knew that we got in trouble before we got home. It was word of mouth, and it went around the neighborhood that way. There was no, I think they may have put something in the newspaper about the graduates of Bruton Heights. But other than that, if there was something accomplished, it was word of mouth. It was not published. We didn't have a black newspaper. We had each other. We had the families.
And the churches.
The churches. And that was it.
To sports, and he decided, you know, he went to basketball games at Walsingham, Bruton Heights, and James Blair. So at the end of the basketball season, he put together a all-area team. And 12 guys on that team, 3 were from Bruton Heights. And they put pictures in the block pictures in the Gazette, you know, but they had white guys' pictures next to a black guy's picture. And, you know, 30 years later, that reporter was a friend of mine who told me how all the amount of flack he got for putting white boys' pictures and black boys' pictures touching each other in the newspaper.
And that was in 1965.
That's 63.
1963. I want to know about the nightlife.
Well, you got to talk to your daddy about
It's not me.
You know, okay, the nightlife. You know, I was talking to Kate, and I was telling her how good our nightlife was. And as we talked, I said, hey, I've never seen you at none of those things. she didn't participate in the nightlife of Williamsburg. But I mean, I had a wonderful nightlife.
You
You know, I bet. About 3 doors down was Fat Jackson place, but I wasn't allowed to go to Fat.
Hold on, so 3 doors down was Fat Jackson.
Yeah, right on the corner.
That was a club.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a club.
I don't know about that.
Look, we didn't have what you call a facility like you can see today. That was the best we had. Matter of fact, the Fat's place over there, they didn't even have bathrooms. And then down in Grove, what is the Elk Fly Center? Yeah,
Hideaway.
Yeah.
Cobra Club.
And we would go there, and then we would go on Church Street. Down at the end of that street, there was a club down there. Then Fats built another club right behind that club. And then we would go up a couple blocks up the road. We had Club 60.
Then you know where all the clubs are.
Oh yeah, and now let me get on this. Okay, let me get across on this. I'm going to turn the curve a little bit. We had what you call Love Cabin Beach.
Oh yeah.
And Love Cabin Beach was, I mean, it was a godsend to us. And you know, and actually, I'm just showing you this now. We didn't have a need to be integrated because we had everything we wanted right here, and we didn't know anything about integration. And we used to have buses coming in to Love Cabin Beach. And where else could you have found a place that had big tall pine trees in the sand right on the beach? I mean, we loved it. Then we had the dance hall up the top, a dance hall down the bottom. We had games up the top where you could pick those little ducks on the water. I mean, and then we had a big club, restaurant up there that people would come in. And we had little fast wheels and stuff.
Wasn't it on the chicken circuit?
Huh?
Wasn't it on the chicken circuit?
Chitlin.
Yeah.
They had some big names.
They did. Who did they have at Log Cabin Beach?
James Brown.
Yeah.
You name it.
You know, a lot of people may not have heard of it. And I tell you, when it ended, I mean, I was so sad. They put a fence, Colonial Williamsburg, bought some of the property. They put a fence. You see, the beach was up on the hill, then they had a cliff. Then you go down to the water, and all that area was sand and shaded. You know, and you could picnic right in under the pine trees, and then the pine trees extended on out to the water. But when Colonial Williamsburg put the steps right down the middle of the beach, they kept one side going for a long time. But eventually, you know, it was a group of black men who owned that beach.
Who were the black men?
Whitings was one of them.
Well, Whitings was one of them. Ed Lowe was one of them.
Right.
I think Josh Palmer was involved in it. And Raymond Redcross, who had the garage right up the end of Oak Drive, he was a part of it. And it may be some other, but you know, those that I remember right offhand. But I mean, you know, some things you never knew how good we had it, because when you don't know something about the other side, this is all we had, and this is all we knew. And then, you know, and later, I was so proud when they named some of our schools. One of our teachers, she substituted for us, Claire Bird Baker, they named the school here in Williamsburg, and our principal, D.J. Montague, they named the school after him. So, you know, I'm honored for that. But those are some things that I can remember so well.
So you said James Brown. Who else?
Oh, it was a lot of people. I can't recall.
Most of the blacks that were on it, they call the Chitlin circuit.
She probably was Chitlin. I know about the Chitlin circuit.
They do go down to the
Yeah.
Let me say this, just before we get off. Our
Did they serve chitlins?
No. Because, look, our cleaners man, who owned a wagon wheel over in Gloucester, Leon Gregory, and Dick Clark in Philadelphia. You know, remember Dick Clark? Dick Clark? He would call down to Leon because the black folks, they had to go down, when they go down south, they would go down 17, and he would call ahead. So all of those people would go there, come stop in this area. I remember one night up at the skating arena here in Williamsburg, we had Otis Redding. Not Otis Redding.
Santa?
No, it was Santa? Yeah, it was Otis Redding. He was up here in Williamsburg, and Leon was going to open that place up so that we could have a place here in Williamsburg. But so many people, they had to park across in the Howard Johnson, not Howard Johnson, but John Yancey, and they said no. But we did have that one show here, so we had all the popular singers on their way down to Atlanta, Savannah, somewhere like that. They would stop here in Williamsburg because they clock would call it. I mean, he really looked out for us down here.
I think I would like to add one thing, and this is, I think it's fair. I remember reading about the civil rights team, Dr. Martin Luther King and others, who had to make a tough decision about whether they were going to really push the integration of schools. And they made the decision that yes, it was important, and it was going to make a big difference. Having been in education as long as I was, there's a dark side that, I don't know, we don't talk about. When you were at Bruton Heights and you had chemistry, some people might have had physics or classes like that, guess who was sitting in the seats? All of us. My mind tells me that when we integrated the schools, they invented special education. Really? I really believe that. And the community went, wow, it's over now. We've broken that barrier. But then they resegregated the schools inside. Now you go look at the physics class and the chemistry class. Don't see us. What happened?
Dr. Lewis, they say that we fought so hard for equality that we forgot about equity. And that's what happened. We integrated and we fought for equality, but we didn't demand equity.
Right, but then I guess we didn't know, didn't expect it, you know?
But we had more control of our schools under segregation. Sure. Right.
Right.
We lost that control.
And we lost, and how many teachers did we have in the schools?
Right.
That went down the hill real fast. You know, might have made you a counselor or something like that.
They don't want to stress us.
I have a question. Now, you were assistant superintendent in Williamsburg. Can you just share how that experience was?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that. Well, it was very interesting. I think that there were a lot of applicants, and my mom had a clipping from it. It was a number of applicants, and so I guess my credentials and everything and experience earned the position.
Could you tell us what time period that was?
I got to go by Brandon. How old was Brandon when we moved to? Our baby is 35 years old. So I guess, where is?
63? No, 73.
Brand was born in 85. So, what year was it that we moved to Williamsburg and I took the position of assistant superintendent? It would have been in late 80s, 87. Okay. So anyway, that went well until the superintendent and the school board had a falling out, and they bought out his contract and they made me the acting superintendent. I don't mean to say anything disparaging about the leadership at the board level, but there were some people on the board who knew more about education than anybody else. And many of them were associated with William & Mary. Okay. And I had one of those persons during the time that they were looking for or leading up to the search for the superintendent, one of those persons said in front of me with somebody else, I'm not going to vote. I wouldn't vote for him. Okay, all right. So I got that message. And it was not something that I think I would have wanted, really, because some of the people on the board thought I should be building better relationships with the principals. Okay, I don't think that's going to happen. And one of them was, you would know what I'm talking about. I don't think that would happen. You know, and so I moved on to my first superintendency in Virginia, though. But
How long did you hold that position?
Here, I would think maybe about
A year.
a year and a half.
A year.
Okay. But it wasn't a very welcoming thing as far as trying to be inclusive, you know. And many of the teachers that they were hiring at the time could not relate to the kids, but they graduated from there. But at any rate, I think it was an experience that taught me some things. Okay, and as I reflect upon it now, there were some valuable lessons, but I don't think we could get away today with what was gotten away with back then.
In terms of
Recognizing that blacks have value
okay.
and have educational background and just as qualified as anybody else, but you know, if you graduated from a different college, you might not get a job in Williamsburg. So.
Well, yeah, but you realize that's just as true today as it has ever been. By the time I just got so frustrated, I just threw my hands up and said, I'm not joining any other committees and this sort of stuff. I was doing a school strategic planning committee exercise, and the number was thrown out that something like 43% of the faculty had degrees from William & Mary. Yeah, I mean, some of those folks happen to be African American, but you have to dig deeper than their academic experience is just like everybody else is sitting in
that 43.
Sitting in the classroom. Then the real straw that broke the camel's back when they asked us to recruit those of us from HBCUs. Would you go to your would you volunteer to go to your alma maters and recruit? And I'm sitting at a table with a preacher and another deacon, so I can't say this exactly the way I said it, but I said blank no. Because you're paying people to recruit at Women Married, and at UVA, at Old Dominion, pay people to go to Norfolk State, Hampton, West Virginia State, A&T. That didn't make sense to them. In other words, we really don't think that we're going to find quality educators at those schools. And when you think about it, that's where our teachers came from.
Yes.
They had master's degrees from Cornell and Columbia and NYU because the school system sent them there so they wouldn't apply to go to UVA and Women Married. So the point I'm trying to make is that from our day, from when we were in elementary school until the time now our grandkids are in elementary school, the game is still the same. We got to convince you that this is the way the world is, and you're gonna have to figure out how to deal with and accept that.
You know, as you stated just now, I look at my son over there,
he was a track star in high school, and his coach was a graduate of William and Mary. And I think he could tell you, he knew that his coach did not want him to apply to William and Mary. He was a scholarship recipient at he was the state champion in track, and he had a scholarship to VMI, James Madison, but his coach frowned upon, and they knew that he knew that his coach didn't want him to go to William and Mary, and they would joke with the coach, "I want to go to William and Mary," and he would not, he would not recommend them to go to William and Mary.
But he was smart.
Yeah, he was smart.
He was smart.
Yeah, and he graduated from James Madison in 4 years. I'm sure he could have graduated from William and Mary, but they did not want him to go to William and Mary, and William and Mary never recruited him. But, he had recruits, and he was considered the number 10 in the world because he won the junior national, and he went over to Brazil, Santiago, Chile. Yeah, Santiago, Chile. And that's what number 10. But yeah, not recommended. So this is something that Williamsburg that some people think you're not wanted, but this is just another experience that we have to endure. And like I said, we didn't take it seriously because we knew and not anything better, and we didn't pursue something that we knew that we weren't wanted in.
Do you think we have that sense of community still? The sense of community that you all felt and experienced when you were at Bruton Heights, do you feel like your grandchildren and the generation now has that same sense of community?
I think it's complicated by the fact that just like Williamsburg is made up of, when we were in high school, Williamsburg was made up of Williamsburg folks. As I said, I was the outsider, and I was born here, but my roots weren't here. Today, the overwhelming majority of people in the area are integrated into the community. But having said that, there's still some sense of community. It's fostered by some of the organizations that Yvonne was talking about, and this sort of thing. And some of those people have very successfully integrated themselves into the community, including into the Black community, and have built some bridges between the communities, which is why I sort of picked up the microphone, because I wanted to share a story about these two worlds that we live in. I have, and I'll preface this story by saying, absolutely dear, beloved friend, and former colleague, who happens to be a white female, and unfortunately happens to be ill, very ill, who's a 1965 graduate of James Blair High School. Which means, guys, and some of you met her because you were at Stanley's funeral. She and a couple of others of the James Blair 65 graduates came to Stanley's funeral. Well, you were there, yeah. But anyway, God bless her heart. She has argued for I don't know how many years that we've been friends since high school. You didn't know me in high school? Yes, I did. You just didn't, you're too popular. You just didn't pay attention to me. I knew you in high school. And you didn't know me in high school. Yes, I did. So then I tried this. And you're mistaking me for Stanley. Oh, I know Stanley. You know, I know just for you and Stanley. So I couldn't convince her, so I had to, yeah, I played that one too. So then I said, look, I ain't know no white women when I was black. You know, and if my parents knew I did, you know, they wouldn't take kindly to that. You know, not because of their prejudice, because they know that this is a dangerous world out here. You know, but she was convinced that she knew me in high school, and you want to talk about me, and I'm telling you, because I fought many a battle. This community is a lot different because of some of the battles that we fought together over my 30 years in James City and her 30 years in York County. So I know this person. She's serious. She believes she knew me when we were in high school, and not when we met in 1976 when I came back to town. We live in different worlds, guys. Is the point I'm trying to make. You know, they our European brothers and sisters think that their world is right. Sort of like we think our world, you know. And the assumption, unfortunately, is that we got to subjugate our world to their worldview. Okay, and that you know, that box is gone. That train is gone. That's not going to happen. But we're still living in two worlds. There's still one black and still one white, and they're still unequal.
Right.
Can I you go ahead, Yvonne.
Not quite.
Well, I wanted to say, Yvonne Ted Lawson, that just the other day, I was asking a friend, I said, yeah, when whites come back to Williamsburg, are they able to walk in their neighborhood and say, that's where I live? Are their homes torn down like ours? You know, I walk on Nicholson Street, where Mr. Baker lived, Reverend Wales and his family lived, and there was a fellowship hall there, and even where the Franklin House was, that area was black. That's all the only thing left in there is Mount Eric Church. And even where Freddie lives, that neighborhood was black. Her house is still there in Reed, but most of the homes of black people aren't there. 3 left.
Two. It was only 3 black homes there.
Yeah, but I mean, walking over that way.
That Mr. Crump.
Right, they're all down there.
And that on South Henry
Right,
Street, but not on southbound.
But on that area, I'm saying, because we're black. So that, when you were talking about the ditch, on the other side of that ditch is where the black homes were. Just like with our church. That was torn down. What? It was a parking lot. That's what it was. Yeah, they're excavating now. But, so it's...
What church are you speaking of?
First Baptist Church. But that seems to be our community. It's like it had no value. So, you know, even at Nicholson Street, it's nothing there where it wasn't like they tore it down to build something here. No. And Franklin Street is a parking lot. And then even the old school that's the area there, and they have somewhere they do some type of educational thing. But then there was Harrison's store, and I've been trying to find out where that is, because during the time, his store was like one of the well-known stores in the area. He loaned money to the president of Women Married. We don't know anything about it. It's not even designated on the street where that store was, and everybody went there. And he was one of the richest people, in the area, in Williamsburg, not on Williamsburg, from Newport News on up to Richmond. And he was black. We don't even know where that is. You go over to the Triangle. That's where we had our hospital. We had offices, Dr. Pegler, the dentist, and Dr. Blake was there with the hospital. And then we had Charlie Garrett,
barbershop.
Right. So we had businesses, and then of course the Triangle Hospital, the store there. Mhm. All of that's gone. It's like we didn't exist. So I just wonder, once they come back, do they see their homes? Or what is their community? They torn down like us? They left the parking lots or whatever. I don't know.
Can I ask a question, Carlin Laster? We kind of see that happening in now, especially in some major cities. But I'm starting to see that it happen here, and I guess that could be considered an urbanization. But those communities that part, well, gentrification, absolutely. So those communities once fragmented, what effect did it have? Because you no longer had your church, you no longer had your next door neighbor. You know, what effect did that have on those folks from those communities that were kind of pushed to the outskirts?
Let me just say this. Williamsburg had had a lot of streets, and I can't call the name of the streets now, but I do remember Clay Street ran on down by the train station, and that was a whole community. And if you know what the community, Christopher Adams is, Yvonne's mother used to have a beauty parlor up there, and all of those streets were wiped out. And then you have South Henry Street. It's a beautiful street now, but that street was from where the old asylum was, all the way down South Henry Street. Yeah, I think the only thing left now is a little club we used to go there. The Sonics down. And those people, they worked for Colonial Williamsburg. They didn't have transportation, and they built a community called Forest Glen. And I used to go up with the guy who's over all of that, North Bay. And he was showing they had to do some urban renewal because they were built so shabby, and they were given permits and authorizing each inspectors. And he showed me, I can look at the made a cement pad on the ground, and I can look to the side of those things and see the inside, the light on the inside of the house, on the base of the foundation. And they accepted that as okay. And they moved all of those people from off South Henry Street and Christopher Adams, but that was a community, they had apartments and everything over there. And they moved them all up to Forest Glen, big community now. But they had no transportation because they all worked for Colonial Williamsburg in the city, and they had to find transportation, and it was an expense for them. And then they had to go out and buy those houses because they didn't pay the full assessment, pay for their homes in Williamsburg. And I get, let me go back to another thing now. We have like Kate and Thomasine from Grove, and I know those guys down there. They joined together and they had very nice homes. If you don't know where Grove is, on the other side of Busch Garden, down on 60. And I mean, they were nice homes, but they chipped in together because they could not get loans from the bank to build their homes, so they had to help each other. And then I think brought them closer together. And then they had, and the way the community of Grove was formed, they came through, the government came through, and I'm not speaking of Bruton, I'm speaking of reservation down on the weapon station. That's where our family came from. Lots of families came from there, and they all came. This is where we are today. This is where my grandfather, all of this around here, this is where he settled. And they came, I don't know how many hundreds were pushed off that property. Yeah, eminent domain. And then I'm getting to Camp Barry, but then they had Fort Eustis. We were living down there. Matter of fact, one of the churches, they have Marbury Island there. And that's where we were at Fort Eustis. And some of them moved here to Hampton and over in the colony off of Rich Lake Road. And that's where a lot of them moved. And then you have Magruder, which is up here. When Camp Perry came in, the only place that they could find that was suitable was to move them off of Camp Perry. So if you look at the Highland Park area, the Grove area, and you know, you saw some of them settled all around the community. Cooktown. So all of those things, and this is where we were pushed off. And then on the campus of William and Mary, where the football field is, that was what you call a CC camp.
Yes.
And that was different for a long time. And because people living today lived on CC campus, which was a part of Williamsburg campus, and that's where that's how we were pushed off a good way to go.
May I ask a question? I don't want to like. When I first came around here my name's Cynthia Lassiter. When I first moved to Williamsburg, I saw a love of community. I mean, from everybody, and all of you people. Some of us parted together, but we became friends. But I did see the presence of fraternal organizations, Oddfellows, Household Rules, Masonics, Elves. And what I would like to know if, because you all were here, I saw a video with the parades, and they were marching. They had parades, and the Masonics were marching, and the Oddfellows, and all of them were just unified. And I thought that was wonderful because I didn't see that where I was from, North Carolina. I didn't see it. But I just thought it was wonderful. So if anybody has any input on the fraternal type organizations and how they nurtured the community, because I've heard about it, and how they nourished the people of the community and how they were community minded. Because see, now you have some organizations, they claim to be community minded, and their purpose is to nurture the community, but they don't. So if anyone has any input on that, I would really like to hear just a blurb about the fraternal organizations that existed during that time. Thank you.
Burn Hall Conference. I can only speak, I say about the Masonics, because my father was one, and he, several years ago, received a 50-year pin for having been in it for 50 years. My husband is one, and we've been in there quite, he and his brother. And those were organizations that were viable. The ladies, because Miss Meekins was very active. Eastern Star was a very active, and they worked with the Masons and what have you. And I'm skipping ahead. What we are seeing as we've grown and gotten older, those organizations are dying because they're not getting new members. They're not getting young members. Mr. Lassiter here joined the Masonic Lodge. My husband is a member. He said they're good men. They are, but they're older men. And, the body you just get to the point where you can't, do what you used to do. And without new blood, you just can't keep things going. And that is the sad part, because we still have a need for those kinds of organizations. Because we've heard about what's going on, what happens in the black schools and what have you, and that because communities are kind of fragmented, obviously, from what they were when we were growing up. So you need something to fill in that gap for the people of the community, and I dare say for our children. And I'm going out on a limb to say something in terms of you're talking about communities. I belong to Union Baptist Church. It's located in Highland Park. Well, we see with our eyes when the generations that had houses there died. It's unfortunate a lot of times the relatives left behind don't keep up the taxes, so they go up for auction, and guess who buys them? And if you all come to Center Lightfoot, across the railroad track, they have built so many apartments. It's like if you're building them where they're going to be in the road. And I don't know where this traffic is going, but a lot of people are predicting there are people in apartments over in Highland Park. When Colonial Williamsburg decides what they're going to do, guess what? Guess where those people are going to probably go. And this is a prediction. I may not live to see it, but you just wonder: are we aware and awake? And I will say quickly, a few months back, the community organization, they can meet at Union. The church is in the neighborhood, and that's what we can use it for. And I think now some of them are beginning to see that something, may be going on. And I don't want to lose my home. But sometimes we see a little too late. I'm not saying it is or isn't, but we just get the sense that that's the direction that Highland Park is going at this point as we see it. Yeah, if I would like to be wrong. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but that's just kind of the feeling that we're getting.
I'd like to add one thing too. When you talked about urbanization and gentrification, I'm becoming close friends with somebody who was born in, I think, about 1889, died in 1881, and his name was Howard Thurman. Sure. And Howard talked about these three hounds of hell: hate, fear, and deception. And if you talk about deception and put in the word lying or lies, wow, and we've just come from 4 years of big deception, okay, and it's powerful, and it is still tearing us up. But I think that deception concept is what happened to a lot of our parents and forebears that within our lifetime, because they brought up these things like, well, if you don't sell, then we're gonna bring in or eminent domain, right. And I just wish sometimes that we could have reparations. And if I had my way in a magic wand, all those people that were deceived, that money would go to educating kids who were deprived. I mean, I'd send them to college out of that reparations money. It's not for me. It's for what you did to the wealth of those people that you deceived. And I don't know, maybe I'm an angry preacher.
Nothing changes till you get it.
Well, the community of Christopher Adams, that was built to replace the community that they tore up. And as people live in Christopher Adams, you cannot find a sale sign hardly to go up there. They are buying those houses because they want to have a city address in Williamsburg. And they're coming right to the people who own the houses, and they just take the houses right away from them. They don't even go up for sale.
And I just want to say what I know personally about Christmas Adams, because my grandmother and my aunts and uncles lived in Christmas Adams. My family lived off of Clay Street. I'm not in the same generation as you all, but a lot of the stories and a lot of the things that you're talking about today, I remember as well. First Baptist Church being a community hub, Clay Street, your mother, Miss Virginia, the beauty shop. I remember all of that as a child. And I remember my grandmother living on Clay Street. And I remember when they relocated to Tubman Drive. And I remember my aunt getting dressed up and going to these meetings. I didn't know what she was doing. And during the time that I've been doing this work with the village, I had the opportunity to do some research. And I found city council meetings where she'd gone to city council meetings. And Dr. Blayton and different people were going to city council meetings. Dr. Blayton was this staunch advocate that wanted to keep the historic triangle in place, and he fought for that. And my aunt, she went out in the rain and snow and gathered signatures for this petition to get Harriet Tubman Drive built. I spoke to the young man, Mr. Taylor, who was sent up by the Housing Authority. He came up from Newport News. He said, they sent me up here to work with your aunt, this lady, but he said she was a force to be reckoned with, and that Tubman Drive wouldn't be there if it hadn't been for your aunt. And I remember several years ago, she was honored. They had this huge event for her, and she was given a plaque, but she was just this simple, common little lady. She was not formally educated, but she worked hard. She retired from Camp Harry, but she was a force that had that to happen. And I think kind of seeing all of that instilled in me the importance of our community and of doing this work. And I'm sorry to interject on this, because this is definitely all about you all. But I just want you all to know that when you talk about integration and we look fast forward to now, that the same conversations and the same things that happened then, we're talking about now. And we're talking about systemic barriers, systemic oppression. We're talking about the school to prison pipeline. We're talking about the inequities, the lack of minority teachers and people that look like our children, people that come from our community, our culture, you know, people that can relate to our children. All of that is missing. That's a huge part that's missing. WJCC Schools has a double-digit achievement gap that's been in effect since integration. And I know the gentleman spoke about believing that special ed was built, special education was made when we integrated. And I can relate to that because I had a son who was identified and had to have an IEP. One of many African American boys who have to have IEPs. And that's another reason that I started doing the work. Because I wanted to help people. I didn't want people to have the experience that I had. And I told the folks at the school one time, they said, Mr. Williams, what do you want to happen? I said, I don't want to see what happened to my son happen to another child. And fast forward a few years later, here we are, the village, and it's all God. God gave me the vision. He said mentoring, tutoring, and advocacy. God did this. And then God put people in the schools like Crystal. I mean, Crystal is amazing. She's opened her school. We've been able to do things and see things through her. You know, so I just thank you all for this moment today. And I just wanted you guys to know that we are doing the work to honor you all, to honor where you came from, and to understand it wasn't just about urban renewal. It was about dispossessioning of black folks, moving them out of their homes, out of their properties, destroying their communities, destroying our sense of community. And we're going to keep that memory alive. And hopefully we will be able to help our young people as much as we can. We've had a tutoring program. We do book drives. We donate books. We do whatever we can. During COVID, we did clothing and coats. We partnered with other folks.
Pretty much what do you need?
Food. Crystal partnered with us. We were pushing out over 700 lunches twice a week. And then we went into overdrive, and we're doing 2,400 boxes of food with Mount Pleasant every week. So the work is being done. And we are what you call a grassroots organization. We're coming from the bottom up and we're pushing up. And I know a lot of the fraternal organizations, folks have died out. But I will tell you, a lot of those ladies, they mentor me. I talk to some of those ladies and gentlemen, and they mentor me, and they talk to me about the old community, and they encourage us. And I just want to, just say thank you. And thank y'all for, keeping the community intact as much as you have. And we will continue to do that work. And we understand and recognize that there were forces and powers that came in that were beyond our family's control. But that's why we have an advisory board of people that look like you and me, people that come from your communities. And we're going to tell our stories, and we're going to keep those stories. And I just thank y'all for that moment. And I thank Mr. Lassiter for sharing the spotlight with me once again, because he and I were honored not too long ago together. And it's just an honor to be sitting in his presence again. And I'm just, I'm sitting here listening to you all, and I'm just taking it all in. I wish people could hear and see and be here and see this moment. It's just so powerful. And I love you guys. I thank y'all for doing this.
Well, I just want to say thank you for everything that you're doing, because what you're doing is continuing what we hope to do. A lot of us don't live in the area now, but we can see the need for what you're doing. And so when I think Curtis first said something to me, and maybe Crystal, I think, said something about the grassroots movement. I didn't know that much about it, but I thank you for what you're doing and for everything that you're doing for us, for our children, for the generations that come behind us, because it's so important. So I thank you.
Thank you, and I'd be remiss if we didn't point out that a big part of our team is here this evening as well, and
You all don't have to go home, and you don't have to get out of here. You don't. However, we do want to give you the opportunity, if you have any concluding thoughts that you would like to share with the group. Dr. Cork would like to take a group photo before the sun goes down. So, if we don't mind, if anyone. What are they doing to the now to the baby doll? If any of you all have any other thoughts that you wanted to share, we say thank you. I say thank you on behalf of my family, on behalf of my ancestors. We're on their land right now. On behalf of my husband, thank you for being here. Your brothers, and my brothers. I guess I gotta. But yes, I do want to say thank you and to open the floor in case you all had any concluding thoughts you wanted to share.
I just want to say one thing. I know we can live wherever we want. Anyone can come and buy wherever they want. And I heard the other day they were talking about Mike and Eric Dyson, and they said, you live in a white community. And there's no such thing as a white community. That was his land that he bought, and that was the community he chose to live in. There may be whites there, but it's not a white community. And I was just taken back on that, because, and it made me realize that wherever I live, when I moved in my community, I think before, next to a neighbor, he said that they were going to move out. But we became good friends, you know, while I was there. And I never had one word ever said to me. Over the years I've been there. I've been there 44 years now. And I don't consider it as a white community, predominantly white community. I just see it as where I chose to live.
I just want to say I'm honored to be here today. And as you were just saying, it just made me think. But this right here is so special to me because we're remembering our story. And in a way, we're invoking the spirit of the people that came here a long, long time ago and had to start over from scratch. But I believe that spirit is still here. But we have to control our own story. We have to control our own narrative, because our narrative has been taught to us in many different ways. We didn't just become a part of this universe in 1619, but we come from a long history of strength and power. And I just think that we can just keep moving that on as long as we continue to keep in remembrance all that we have gone through, and then teach it to our children and our children's children. And they can live anywhere in this world, but they'll still have knowledge of themselves and who they are, you know.
Caden and Chase was off duty today, but Caden and Chrissy and Casey, my nieces and my daughter who helped serve, they're going to remember this for the rest of their lives. When mommy had those people at the house around the table, and they were able to serve their elders and ask you, did you need something to drink? Do you need anything? Some of them should have met you at the door to make sure that you felt welcome when you came in the door. That's what they're going to remember this for the rest of, and I'm going to remember this for the rest of my days. So.
Let me just say, this is not a rehearsed thing. This is just something as we started talking, and I think it triggered memories that we've had during our lifetime. And you know, when we come, like I say, when we were coming up, everything was just normal. Life was just normal the way it is. And I just thank God that I had this opportunity to grow up at this particular time in Williamsburg. And I still love Williamsburg. I have gone a lot of places in this country, but I've never seen a place that I would rather be than right here in Williamsburg.
Curtis Lassiter. This is the third time I've said this to you. And I say it again because it's true. You are probably the most successful black man I know. You look around your ancestral home with at least three generations of your family. And you look at the quality of kids and grandkids and the knowledge that they have, your sense of spirit, and by the way, I'm talking to you, boy. What's wrong?
It makes me feel so
I just want to catch it for you now.
A lot of folk make a good living. Boy, you made a hell of a good life.
Yes.
Amen.
Can we go on it?
No, we will take a picture.
Okay,